Coming up on this episode of Belief Hole.
Looking into this stuff, you see that you can't box this phenomena into a single explanation. Like everything that is supernatural, seemingly to us, we can't say, well, that's ghosts and that's ghosts, you know?
Gettysburg, this, famously haunted place. One of the arguments is, especially when it's a situation where it's a haunting that's not interacting with you, maybe that's not a disembodied spirit that's stuck on our plane, but maybe it's in fact
captured in the earth.
Exactly, an impression, like analog tape.
Scooby-Doo?
Sorry to break in, but Scooby-Doo was kind of it was the skeptic's ghost cartoon.
That's kind of true. Yeah, because they would catch Farmer McGregor, who was like trying to scare off the corporate realty interests on his land.
Right. Or like it would be like a curmudgeon-y lighthouse keeper. But then the real lighthouse ghost would come down the stairs and then, Shaggy and Scooby would run away and get stoned.
Right.
Shaggy?
It's like that whole idea of like when you go into a room, if you're in the mafia, and like you always need to sit facing the door, because then you're secure behind you. It's like how I sleep at night. I got to make sure my bed's in one area of the room so I can always have the door in front of me.
I want to marry you.
You'll protect me. Honey, can you please sleep by the door?
Honey, okay. Can you lay on the ground and block the doors?
Did you know kangaroos have 2 vaginas?
It was geared towards dragons back then. And
Dragons and... That'd be a good episode. How bored would you be on that episode, John?
Dragons.
Because I would love it.
They could be real.
I don't know. Dragons? Yeah, maybe.
Well, there's a big argument that dragons were...
Dinosaurs exist.
Well, that's the thing. They're surviving dinosaurs.
What is a freaking, pterodactyl? It's like pretty close to a dragon. Conspiracy.
Synchronicity. Sasquatch.
Donald Trump.
Alien races. Satanism in Hollywood. MK Ultra.
Pleiadians.
Mandela effect.
Close the door, Id.
Jeremy!
Close your door! Snowflakes.
Inner Earth. Disagreements.
My lab.
JFK assassination.
Flat Earth.
Corey Feldman. Magicians are demons. Specters and spooks. Sleep paralysis. Muslim Islamicist. The gender spectrum. Yes. Alternative history. Shadow people.
Quiet, I'm trying to say words with the mouth.
Psilocybin. Sorcery. Poltergeists. Sulforaphane. Evolution, is it real?
Skull and Bone. I would never talk about it. That's old. Y2K.
Cover-ups. The Oklahoma City bombing. Vampire.
Well, hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Belief Hole, episode 10, guys.
Neat.
Episode 10.
Super.
This episode is
Brought to you by
Pillsbury Doughboy.
Starbucks.
Walmart. What are you talking about?
I'm just trying to get sponsorship here.
That's really dumb.
Brought to you by, if you say that you're a sponsor and they hear you, then they might accidentally sponsor you.
I think that's worked every time.
I have no sound effects at all today.
Oh, you dark monster.
Sorry.
That's all right.
It'll probably be less intrusive.
Yeah.
To the listeners' eardrums.
Maybe not. Maybe perhaps.
So this episode is...
I love how Chris always brings it back.
Trying to bring it back in.
He's the organizer.
Haunted places, some ghost stories, some original ghost stories.
You said that like you were questioning
places?
yourself.
Yeah, can you say that?
Haunted places?
With less backbone?
I'm Ron Burgundy?
Haunted places?
This is an episode that's at the beginning of John's adventure. He's going on a voyage to Austin, so we're going to be doing some... probably some Skype stuff.
Yeah, remote, a little bit more remote, which might make it more interesting.
Right, and there won't be much of a difference for you, the listener, because, with John's audio powers.
Yeah. No, sonically there won't be.
Sonically there's not going to be any issues.
But we won't be in the same room for a couple
months. We're going to be able to read each other's ugly body language.
I'm not going to be offended by Chris's dirty looks.
You'll still be in the room with me.
Or John's lack of interest in what I'm saying.
Yeah, I can totally pretend that I'm enjoying it.
As long as John's quiet, I'll assume he's listening intently.
John's disinterest will not bother me. It will not throw me off track.
Because we won't see it in his eyes.
Yeah, so I'm heading to Austin for a couple months and possibly more, depending on if I find a job there. So
yeah,
I went for a visit a month ago, and I've lived there for 10 years and been back in Ohio. We got the show off the ground, and I went back and I was like, I miss it.
Yeah, it's a cool city.
I miss the...
Are you going to be able to handle the traffic, though? With the intense claustrophobia?
I went back there and it didn't bother me as much. I think being in this small town for so long, really helped me kind of...
Decompress.
Reconnect and decompress and ground myself. And now, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the energy.
You just need a few month break.
Yeah, I needed to get away from the intensity. And also it'll be nice because I don't have my dog.
Yeah.
I'm gonna miss the out
You
of
better
Jake.
hope he's not listening to this episode.
I love Jake, but
be hurt.
he's a lot of work, and it'll be nice to just roam a little bit and enjoy my freedom.
Especially with his knees,
His doggy knees.
You know, I looked at that when
Did
I
you?
saw him, and he does have knees.
Where are they?
on the
his-
front, right?
It's hard to explain. You have to
does
see
have
him.
knees.
His legs are so long that he has like a knee in the middle, and then like the backwards at the top. It's almost like he has elbows. Like,
he does.
He
yeah.
has a knee and then but
It's like an
even,
elbow and a wrist.
Even on his legs, his back legs, his hind legs, his legs are so long that he has like knees and then elbows.
There's
It's
a
like
group
God
of
gave him extra joints because of his long
think
legs.
so.
there's a
yeah.
group of listeners out there that are going, oh God, they're talking about dog knees again.
Look at your dog. Understand your dog's anatomy.
So this is kind of probably going to be our last Halloween related episode. We're getting
Well,
to
we
the
might
end
get
of
it.
the
We might
season.
stick another one in there.
I
But
don't think so, dude.
This
I
is
think
the
we
one-
just talk about this before.
dude, step off.
You just
okay?
said, why are you promising things you can't
I'm not
keep?
promising nothing.
You think we're gonna get another
No, but we
episode?
just had a
You know how we
conversation.
roll. 2 weeks is a pretty
Man.
good turnaround time.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Absolutely.
You think we're gonna fit?
No. But we just said we may have additional ghostly content that could be.
Well, yeah. I mean,
be
considering
released-
In this episode?
No. I'm just saying, like,
no.
no.
I'm gonna have to clip that.
No. What is that? Oh, like copy
Yeah,
it? You want me to do a better one?
No, I like.
No,
you
no.
can't repeat it.
I can do it as much times as I want. No.
okay, it's getting obnoxious.
Okay. I'll stop. Chris,
Fail.
you are such a party pooper.
Sometimes someone has to be.
No, my point was that this is going to be our last altogether brotherly Halloween episode, and that's why it's going to be the best one yet.
Again, promising
I
things.
promise.
He's over here promising things left and right.
I promise this is going to be our
Jeremy
best
the
episode.
Promiser.
Try to hype it up, man.
No, it'll be good.
It's going to be great.
It'll be good. Well, we're going to share some personal stories, and we got some call-ins we're going to share.
And we're going to have some ghostly interviews.
I
Stories.
think after this episode, we're gonna do some maybe broader topics. Maybe
More conspiracy
Well, yeah,
stuff?
we've been in the
I
Halloween
mean,
zone.
we've been in like we've been in like the ghostly demon
Yeah.
ghoul realm for a lot
Yes.
of our episodes.
Well, yeah, we definitely. Well, some
But
of
who
the
knows? It'll
early
probably still default back to
some
this.
of the early conspiracy stuff we talked about just naturally led into the spiritual, energetic, like the occult stuff.
Yeah,
You
that
know
was
what I
kind
mean?
of the most compelling stuff to us at the beginning, and
Right.
I'm sure it'll wrap around to that again.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping to expand a little bit, maybe some flat Earth stuff again, and
Yeah, I've-
possibly
some more
some
flat Earth
climate
debates.
change debating.
Oh, that's weird.
Is that a
Did you guys
demon?
hear that?
That sounded like a snore.
I was thinking calling it global snoring. That'll be the title of the
Global
episode.
snoring.
Because we were like,
That's
it's not a
great.
global warming.
Little snore.
Where's the conspiracy there?
No, but there's an interesting climatologist that I think is really fascinating, and he goes against everything the mainstream media
Ooh,
says about
climate conspiracies.
Yeah, I mean, I hate how there's just this closed debate. Like, there's no room for debate anymore. We've solved everything about it. It's that our demise is imminent. It's like, no, there's other rational minds that have a whole different side of the story to tell, and I'd like to present their argument.
But if they're not in the news, then
How do we trust them if
Yeah.
they're not on CNN?
so this climatologist is a science denier, is what you're saying.
Yes, he's a science denier. I love how
I
the
deny
labels
it.
they put on people too. It's
Like
like
conspiracy theorists?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
another wonderful label created by the CIA. Look it up.
exactly.
To delegitimize those with other ideas.
Yeah, the use of language is an interesting way to defame and shame people into your
Absolutely.
ideas and agendas that you want to push.
That's why I try never to use language as much as possible.
I try to telepathize as much as possible.
Telepathize. I like that. Yeah, well, I'm excited because, the paranormal, like the ghosty stuff, it's to me, it's fun, it's intriguing, but we've done so much
Ghosty
of it.
stuff.
I feel like once we get through Halloween, there are some other topics I want to get into too. Like
Even like psychotropics and
psychotropics, what is the relation to psychotropics in the actual physical dimensional reality of our existence? Like how much hallucinations real?
Parallel dimensions.
Parallel dimensions.
Corey Feldman.
We've got a friend and professor we want to have on to talk
Oh,
about.
that'd be a good one.
Yeah, I want to talk about. It might be twofold. We might get into some YouTube censorship stuff, but we definitely want to get into also some video game related conspiracy theories that are pretty fascinating. Actually, some
That sounds
darkness in there.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Talking about Brad.
Yeah, and we might have some pretty interesting interviews coming up in the months following.
We will
the Halloween
have some
season.
pretty interesting interviews coming
We will have some.
There you go, promising things again.
So we might have.
Jeremy the Promiser.
We might make good episodes in the future. Maybe.
Maybe.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
we will.
No, we will.
We will.
We will.
It's
I have
great.
no doubt in our ability to make more amazing episodes.
We actually recorded another show prior to this one that was a new segment we'll be introducing called
Language.
off the cuff, which is more of a free form sort of idea exchange between all of us, and it's going to be a little bit of a test and go, but I think they're meant to be a little bit shorter and more unedited,
less research based,
less planned.
Right. Just casual conversation.
Casual conversation. But so getting into this episode is a little bit tricky, but I think we're getting in the groove right now.
The mindset.
Especially without sound effects.
I know.
If you had your sound effects to get me into it.
If I could hear myself saying spooky, then
I know. Isn't it weird how now you want them now that they're gone? Because
I do.
You're always like looking at me
just to get in the mood.
When you're like, ugh.
Oh, that sound effect.
Give me dirty looks when I'm
I was saying something
dropping sounds in the middle of the show.
You bell ding me.
I know. I've got nothing. So
good.
But yeah, so how are we starting this one off?
How do we do this?
Well, so we're kind of doing haunted places on this episode, talking about,
because there are a lot.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I think that we had the idea to kind of focus in on this topic is because some of our call-in stories are specifically haunted places, experiences in locations where people have had abnormal spiritual
and the question
events.
of where does this come from? The typical ghost explanation of like, oh, it's people that have died and their spirits have moved on. But then, of course, you have the argument of like, well, it's actually mostly or all demon.
Step up to the mic, Jeremy.
Yeah, you're a little quiet over there.
Excuse me. Hi, is this okay?
Is this on?
It's my first time on the microphone. So the difference, the question, where was I? The question of what is causing this phenomenon? Because we've all experienced aspects of this. John, you've told your story before in the basement of our house with the refrigerator door flapping and flipping. And we've all had kind of experience. Everyone out there has had or have heard or knows someone that have had these experiences.
Well, that's an overly broad generalization.
Every single person
well, it is,
knows this is going to be a great episode.
But when you talk to people, though, I think most people have had some sort of a paranormal experience in their life.
Yeah, so I looked.
You may have to dig deep. But
I looked it up a little bit before I came in, and I was just looking at like polls, and there was a poll done.
The Rasmussen poll.
It's not that one.
Okay,
I'm not sure what that is, but
it's a political.
By
poll.
your smile, I would guess it was political.
Smile at politics.
45% of Americans believe in ghosts and believe that the ghosts are people that have died specifically and
really
either haunt or can come back at certain points for certain occasions or whatever. But what was weird was there was a more recent poll that said 60% of people claim to have seen a ghost. So those numbers don't really match up. And I mean, that's what you get with polls.
I think though that people that are prone to not believe things are more likely to just dismiss it as something that was just a figment of their imagination.
Right. Or scientific anomaly. Like some of the skeptical explanations for haunted places are either like infrasound or carbon monoxide leaks or these things that can affect your psychology.
Swamp gas.
Right, which to a degree, to a degree that can explain some stuff. But not all. Like you can explain, I think infrasound has been shown to explain disorientation, feelings of anxiety, maybe even feelings of like a presence in the room.
Presences.
But it doesn't explain seeing a figure of a pioneer walking through your wall at 3 in the morning.
And consistent.
And that's the other thing. And
like where you see the same thing in the same place by multiple people.
Other people have seen it.
That's an interesting one because have you heard of the stone tape theory, John, when it comes to hauntings?
No.
Okay, so that's interesting. Actually, as a sound engineer, you'll appreciate that.
I think I have, actually, but go fill me in.
Yeah, once I tell you, you'll probably be like, oh yeah. So the stone tape theory is the concept that somehow geologically, really significant, emotionally traumatic events can be recorded somehow within the material world.
Energetically, right?
And then something will like trigger it to replay at certain points in time in the future. So like you might see like Civil War battles, for example, like Gettysburg, this famously haunted place. One of the arguments is, especially when it's a situation where it's a haunting that's not interacting with you, but where you're watching a replay of some entity's experience. One of the arguments is maybe that's not a disembodied spirit that's stuck on our plane, but maybe it's in fact something that was so traumatic that happened emotionally that there was
captured in the earth.
Exactly, an impression like analog tape, and that's why it's called stone tape, which is interesting.
Like reality's needle skipping on a distinct experience that caused a
and I don't even completely discredit that theory. I think I mean, from what I know about how analog technology works, it seems sort of possible.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how the mechanisms would work, but when you have massive amounts of organic materials in the earth that may be able to record that kind of thing.
Massive
like,
amounts of energy.
Like needle and vinyl.
yeah, when you have
Imprinting on it.
incredible amounts of trauma happening on the battlefield, and then you have large stones and whatever. I mean, that's all analog tape is. It's obviously man-made, and it's provides a very specific function to play back very specific things, but it makes sort of sense in a way.
Well, and we know that crystalline structures, like crystals, can be used in a scientific way to record certain information, and that's a material that's all around us. You know, it's all built into the world. I mean, obviously, crystals or other elements, right, in our surroundings that could potentially be recording this energy, so that that kind of experience, the ghost that we see, the ghost experiences or reports from people where they seem to be paying no attention or very little attention to you. If anything, if any kind of attention, it's maybe a reaction from that quote spirit. That could be a recording,
right?
It could be nature's recording of something.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating explanation, but obviously does not explain the countless experiences people have when there's interaction involved,
like
when
poltergeists or demons,
right? Or when there's entities that seem to be responding to people within a situation,
and that could be a different phenomenon altogether.
Right.
But it gets lumped in because it's this kind of paranormal, supernatural experience that we can't define, and it has elements that correlate with each other that seem to have a consistent streak running through it. That it is this kind of like non-corporeal vision that we see, but when you have something interacting with you, like that is
right,
like,
that's got to be something completely different,
right? And that's why I think people make the argument that like any of that poltergeist activity, anything where they pretend to be someone you know, or even maybe there are experiences where they are and they're here a limited time, but then there are people that say, well, most of it is when it's interacting or it's malevolent, it's a jinn, a demon, a dark entity that we can't explain but lives alongside us or parallel to us in another dimension.
And I think that it's very likely that these phenomena are just a menagerie of all of these things.
Right.
I don't think it's all demons. It's all
it's not black and white.
It's all stone tape. It's all. I think it's probably a combination of. I mean, this reality is so vast and mysterious. It's probably a menagerie of different things that are causing these different.
Menagerie. He likes that word.
I like
a
that.
menagerie, a cacophony,
it's a plethora.
a plethora, a panoply,
It's a bouquet,
a gaggle,
panoply.
Panoply. John likes that one.
That's a good one.
That is a good word.
You know what it means?
A lot.
It's like an array of weapons or something like that.
A panoply
of weapons?
It actually has several.
So
different
like an
meanings,
arsenal,
like a battery.
It also means to be, I think, like armored by God.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, it's like it has to do with like being prepared for battle. It has multiple meanings.
We should have a word of the day thing on Believe Hole.
A panoply of something, but I like that word.
Did you know kangaroos have 2 vaginas? Anyway,
the male ones too.
This actually, would this be a good time to start the story?
Yeah,
because
I was going to say, since we're gonna play some interviews or some call-ins with ghost stories.
We could have a personal
John, I want to hear.
experience.
I want to hear you recount your.
It's kind of actually a good bridge to what we're talking about. How things can be caught,
emotional
replaying,
trauma.
and I mean, it seems to, I don't think we planned talking about it that way, but it sort of makes sense playing it back in my mind. So.
Pun intended.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what that means exactly, but
playing it back like a tape,
like a recording.
Oh, yes, like a analog tape that's coming back into my mind. That this was many years ago, so I'm hoping I'm going to get the story as good as possible. But it was a pretty intense situation. It was one of those events in your life that just sort of gets crystallized. It sort of made me believe in paranormal things. As I was going to school in Canada.
When was this?
This was 2003. London, Ontario, just above the Great Lakes, just above Lake Erie on the opposite side of Ohio. And right in the middle of this, it's like a city of maybe 150,000 people. And so like not a small city, but not an enormous city either. And right to the north of the center of the town, there's this massive abandoned insane asylum. So this thing was massive. It was like close to 2 football fields long. And just this grim-looking, dungeon-esque sort of monstrosity in the middle of like a city. Like it was just this old building that no longer housed. I mean, I think it was in the 80s when they stopped funding these sort of things.
Wow. Yeah, so it had been sitting there for a while.
At least 20, 30 years. That's what it felt like, at least, maybe even longer than that. So I had been, attending this recording school, and at some point, like, one of my good friends had come up, and I had been talking about with some of my new friends, we should maybe go there. It was kind of like a fun thing to possibly do.
Rite of passage.
Exactly. That's sort of how it felt. It was sort of like bonding experience, with these new people in this new city. Adventure. And my good bud was up there, and we're like, okay, well, let's go check it out. And, I think it was slightly raining that night, and I don't know, maybe 11, 12 o'clock at night. I feel like you can't do this stuff anymore either.
Yeah.
Like, it was at a time still where they just sort of let things happen. So we entered on the first floor, and the first thing, I think we had to kind of jar the door open in the bottom, because I don't know if it had been in, at least the side that we were on. It had been a while since people had been in there. And the first thing we noticed is there was just books careening down the stairs, like just old books, and I think it was just all books. It was just hundreds and hundreds of books just decaying in there. And it was just a weird way to enter the building. It was just this sort of sense of lost knowledge in a weird way. And so we entered the building, and like the first floor, for some reason, we didn't start on the first floor. Went to the second floor, and, we get to the second floor, and it's this insanely long passageway. It's like a football field long almost to get to the center of the building, which is just these rooms where, there's all sorts of bathtubs, and I don't know what was going on, maybe electroshock therapy and weird treatments that they were using on people at the time. But we were sort of like investigating a little bit of the rooms, and we were walking down, and we get, I don't know, maybe 100 feet from the center of the building, and there was just this intensely cold, noticeably had dropped like 10 degrees. And all of us kind of looked at each other and we're like, we're not going to that part of the building. We're just like...
So you could feel it.
Yeah, you always think about ghosts and things that get cold when
right, yeah.
And we're just like, we'd been in the building for maybe 20 minutes at that point. We're like, okay, let's just go explore other places. And so went up to the next level, and we were kind of getting close to the roof, and there was this room right before the roof that was just filled with dead birds. And it was just this weird ass place, because it wasn't the roof, it was like in between the roof, and like we were like, how did all these dead birds get in here? So we ended up climbing up to the roof for a little bit, spent a little bit of time up there, and went back down. And then we headed down to the first floor, which we were at the middle of the building, or not quite at the middle, but we were in some weird big ballroom. I remember there was like school desks turned facing the wall. There was a couple of them that just looked positioned like almost like a discipline sort of.
That's always creepy.
Yeah.
Chairs or desks, anything facing the wall.
Facing the wall in like this weird ballroom sort of area. And that was a very creepy part of the building. We got to a portion of it where it led to this underground basement. And it was like, well, we described it as like a sub-basement. It was dirt floors. And like we all were just like forcing each other to go in. We're like, we need to go explore this for some unknown reason, but we're all terrified to go down there. And we get down there, and like the flashlights literally don't work more than 10 feet in front of us. It was so dark.
I've heard that before, where there's unnaturally...
It was like the dark was eating the light. You couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of you. We were all huddled together at that point. I think all of us at that point were like, what the F are we doing here right now?
The F.
Like, this is not where we should be. But we ended up making it to the end of the sub-basement, and we looked down, and there were two crosses sitting on top of each other with a pair of shoes next to it. The crosses were like stacked on top of each other. I remember one of the kids that I had met at the school picked one of the crosses up, and he just put it in front of his face. And we were just like, let's go. It was just this unanimous, like, we had this feeling of dread, like we needed to leave at that moment. And so we all, were scurrying back towards the entrance.
Each one trying to get in front of the other a little bit.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Out of the way, dude!
Pushing the other person behind you. Like,
Ghost bait, back here.
you realize what kind of a man you are in that position.
I've been there.
And so we make it up. The interesting thing, though, about there, the whole time we were there, not a peep. no sound at all, like zero. Like for this massive building.
And the whole building, not just the basement, the whole building was quiet.
Building was just dead quiet. Like we didn't hear anything the entire time we were there. And so we make it, the only way we could exit, we had to go back to the second floor. And we ended up right where that original middle part of the building that we were freaked out about at the beginning, the cold area.
Yeah.
And it was actually like a shower area for the people that were there. It was like the center area where they corralled all the people and they would give them showers at once. But at this point, we knew we were leaving and we hadn't heard anything. That was creepy, but we were out of there. So we're all we had split into two and two. It was me and I think my friend and then two in front. And we were talking to each other and we were like leaving. So it was like, we were kind of like, chattering with each other. We were feeling a little relaxed. And then all of a sudden, I heard this bang. It was just a bang, one initial one. That was pretty distant at that point, coming from that shower area. And so me and whoever, I can't remember exactly, turned around. And the other two people that were in front of us kept walking because they didn't hear it at first. And so we turned around, we kind of looked and we were like, that was weird. Like we haven't heard anything here the whole night. And then it was just like, bang, 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 bang. The other two people turned around and we all looked at each other and we just sprinted out of the building and like made it to the end. And I think we ran like another mile before we even talked. We went over it a million times in our head. Like, what could that possibly have been?
The bang was moving like towards you, wasn't it?
It was moving right directly at us.
So it wasn't just getting louder from one location. It actually sounded like it was coming towards you.
It was coming towards us. Yeah, it was started, I don't know, maybe 200 feet away and ended up right next to us.
And it was
just
loud.
the consistent like metal banging. Yeah, it was just one of those things where you just like, we talked about it for years after that. It was just like, what could that have possibly been? But in the moment, it was like a ghost.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
Well, it's interesting because like you said, it was
you.
like, well, first of all, it's a place that's abandoned. There's no water running in, there's no electricity.
No, there's no, I don't remember seeing a pipe in there. Oh, I mean, sure there were pipes.
Right.
But it sounded like intentional. That was the weird thing.
Well, that's when you say intentional makes me think how there were the two in front of you and then you and your friend, and then you hear the first bang and then I can visualize it in my mind.
Yeah.
And then like you guys kind of stop after that bang, kind of look at, and the other ones keep walking because they didn't hear it. And then your recognition of that sound, it almost makes me feel like it's possible that like your recognition of that sound allowed it to continue. Like you noticed it.
Yeah.
And then that
focus.
escalation, bang, bang, really close.
It was so like rhythmic in a way too, which is not the way like pipes work.
Like a
too.
random, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were so violently loud too. It wasn't just like a pipe creak or something. It was like something was messing with us.
Yeah.
There was no people in there. There's no way they could orchestrate something. It didn't seem like that anyways, unless there was a group of people waiting for us to come and they were sequentially hitting something like that.
Like the League of
Lunatic Imposters.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, it's not like there weren't people that have been in that place. There was graffiti all over the walls, but it was just too perfectly orchestrated. It felt like it meant to drive terror, especially since it happened when we were in the basement right before that, and we were all filled with terror at that point. We were
almost like that fed the energy.
Yeah, it's like you gave a little appetizer to whatever dark energy might have been there, or trying to feed off your energy. And as soon as they tasted that, then they realized they banged a little and like, oh. You guys kind of were a little scared.
Some energy.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we got a little taste from them. Oh, maybe we can do more. Bang, 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 and then they just
plus if that energy
feasted off of terror.
We took off like little children.
Yes.
Like obviously, this is
leaving your manhood
we
behind you.
wanted to stay there too. We talked about it for so long. We're like, oh, we wish we'd have just investigated it, but we were just
terrified.
So caught up in the moment that we just like we didn't know what else to do but run. And it was funny because we were laughing the whole time. It was like school children. Like we just laughed. It was like we were terrified, but we were laughing, and we knew that.
Were you high?
No. I mean, no, we were not.
The question is like,
no,
I'm serious.
I mean,
I was thinking like, no, we weren't. Definitely not.
I wouldn't want to be in a place like that.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because like
no fun in that.
No.
Walk in the park
in the building
in a sunny day maybe, but not in an abandoned insane asylum. No.
Well, it's interesting because obviously this is all speculation. What this could have been.
It's fact.
But what's funny, or what it made me think of was, not just like it got that little taste of your fear, and then so it kept going, but the potential idea that you're in, like you get to that sub basement. And all of a sudden, Then you started to feel the terror. You see those crosses.
Yeah.
That dark energy comes, maybe not even something realizing like it's getting an appetizer, as Jeremy said, but maybe that woke it up.
Well, that's what it felt like when we picked it up. It was like when he picked it up and put it in front of his face, we all got goosebumps at the same time.
Yeah.
We're like, we shouldn't be here.
Right.
That was how it felt.
We shouldn't be here.
It's a spiritual booby trap.
And maybe that
You picked
fear-
it up, and it started the fear engine. It started the fear engine in the
fear
basement.
engine.
and that's just
Indiana
started
Ghost.
growing. Indiana Ghost.
That's a good spinoff. But yeah, that fear like being a source of its ability to manifest in our reality.
Fuel.
So like the more scared you get, the more power it gets.
Yeah.
And the more ability it has to continue to
We've talked
terrify
about
you.
this many times
Yeah,
on our podcast.
we
It
have.
seems there's this
We're beating
string
a
of thought
undead horse.
where, no, it's a good thing to repeat though. It seems like if there are this phenomena that exists, they do sort of, it seems like feed off of fear.
The fear engine.
And it seems like that's sort of like a consistent theme.
And it's interesting because if you look at a lot of like haunted place situations throughout history, it seems like it always escalates. So it almost, until it gets to an endpoint, but it almost seems like if that fear theory is correct, that feeding off the fear, it makes sense because it's the acceleration of events. So acceleration of power based on the more afraid you get because of that initial instance.
Yeah.
Then that gives
was
you
like
a little
the
more
trigger,
terror.
the spark.
Right. And then every time, the more scary it gets, the more power it gets. So it's always an escalation.
Yeah.
Which makes the most renowned stories so, I think, resonating
Compelling.
throughout time.
Well,
yeah.
think about it as like a form of fear is a form of energy, you know. And I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
look at Monsters
it's one
Inc.,
of the most
you know?
intense forms of emotion you can have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I even like you've experienced this before when you're hiding around the corner behind a closet, like waiting to like scare a friend. You feel like the potential.
It's almost like a darkness
borderline
there.
excitement too, which is interesting.
It's a dark excitement because you know it's going to scare that person, but you almost kind of want to scare him as much as you can.
That's the dark side of the human psyche, right there.
Yeah, and there are maybe entities that's what all they consist of is that desire for that fear, and that's
Yeah,
what they.
it might
That's
Don't
how they
even
survive.
like ghost hunters talk about this too? Like Ghost Adventures talk about like.
Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
I feel like I've heard that sort of.
I think we coined that idea.
Yeah, it's
fear engine,
totally
trademark.
original.
Gleeful LLC.
I like that. I like that fear engine.
No, I think it's a pretty common thread in these hypothesizings.
It kind of makes sense too.
Yeah.
Like it just makes, you drum up that intense level of energy and you somehow, I don't know.
Well, we eat
Eat
food.
it.
We eat food and we convert it to energy. That and fear is a
It's
different
like
kind
the
of
ghost
energy.
photosynthesis.
Exactly.
It's too bad.
Scarosynthesis.
It's too bad that
Scarosynthesis.
it's too bad that facility's gone. It'd be cool to go back.
Remember when we went back, how terrifying it was?
yeah, it was scary then.
We were with a group of people at that point, but it was even creepier at that point because it was like all the windows were blown out. It was
Yeah,
winter.
flapping
and
tarps
There's
and-
flapping tarps
I
and it
just
was
remember-
cold and just like.
I remember walking down like that you were describing that
Corridor.
that hallway where there's rooms on either side. And so to me, like I remember the feeling I got from walking down that was just the exposed feeling of it's not like there's hallways with closed doors or there's one side that has rooms. It's like you're on display for whatever might be in the shadows in those rooms. You're on display like you're on a buffet line just walking down that hallway. That's what I felt like. I remember feeling just so exposed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because if I looked over here on the left to like quickly look and see is there something over there, I knew as I did that there's a whole other area behind me that I can't see that might be looking at me as I'm looking over there. There was this constant feeling of like it's like that whole idea of like when you go into a room, if you're in the mafia and like you always need to sit facing the door because then you're
right.
secure behind you. It's like how I sleep at night. I got to make sure my bed's in one area of the room so I can always have the door in front of me. But like
I want to marry you.
You'll protect me, honey. Can you please sleep by the door?
Honey, can you lay on the ground and block the door so that I know what you mean though. Like I feel the same way. Yeah, like you want to know where your entrances
right,
are.
I think it's
I think it's a
it's an
common
evolutionary natural
for sure.
sense.
Usually it's probably not geared towards ghosts, but
no,
Right.
But
Any kind of
maybe.
threat.
What's
I
a
don't
ghost?
know.
I mean,
Who knows?
Yeah, like a ghost can't come
it
through
was
the wall.
geared towards dragons back then, and
Dragons. That'd be a good
Monsters.
episode. How bored would you be on that episode, John? What's about dragons? Because I would love
They
it.
could be real.
I don't know, dragons. Yeah, maybe.
there's
If you
a-
brought some compelling evidence.
There's a
I might be
YouTube
interested.
video that came out recently
Of course, there's a YouTube video that came
of a
out
potential
recently.
dragon found in a cave.
I mean,
and
if Dogman exists, why can't dragons exist?
Well, there's a big argument that dragons were
Dinosaurs
Surviving
exist.
Well, that's the
dinosaurs.
thing. They're surviving dinosaurs.
What is a freaking like pterodactyl. It's like pretty close to a dragon.
Oh, how many sightings of their?
They may not breathe
pterodactyls?
fire, but
I mean, there's still a lot of sightings of pterodactyls,
Yeah.
even in contemporary times.
I mean, dragons
It's a
could
whole
just
other
be
topic,
dinosaurs.
but-
Like, I don't
Yeah.
understand why that's such a big stretch.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's the mythology that gets wrapped around.
Yeah,
like,
that's
let's say,
true.
and this is off the topic, I know, but like this idea that maybe there were surviving dinosaurs that some in pockets of the world for whatever conditions allowed, like Loch Ness or Mbembe in Africa. But I think it gets tangled up in these ideas of like hoarding gold and things like that. This man-made construction around these potentially real creatures, dinosaurs or whatever. But and that's a whole other thing.
If you
Yeah.
believe in dinosaurs.
I think it's a good time to take a quick break.
Yeah, well, actually, we got to run to the goodbye party right now.
Oh, that's
Oh,
right.
that's right.
John's got a little goodbye party going.
No, it's all good.
We'll save our Ouija. I had a Ouija story, but we'll save it for next.
We'll save
for
our
for some
Ouijas.
other day. Yeah, stick around, guys, because we're going to get into some interviews and some call-in stories that were
Some
pretty.
severely creepy
pretty
stories.
bone
Spooky
chilling.
Halloween banter.
Keep you in the mood.
Halloween.
So, guys, give a good warm
Halloween.
audio goodbye to John.
Goodbye,
Wish him
guys.
safe travels.
I'll see you again, though.
We'll see you in the next episode,
Hear you
John.
again.
Yeah.
You're going away, but you're sticking with us.
We'll miss you, brother.
All right, guys.
Stick around after the break.
Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker here. You, chopped your wife and daughter up into little bits. Then you blew your brains out.
I don't have any recollection of that at all.
What are ghosts? And why do they keep repeating the same actions over and over again?
It might very well be a poltergeist intrusion instead of a classic haunting.
There's a difference. Poltergeist disturbances are fairly short duration. Hauntings can go on for years.
One theory is that a haunting is a violent release of energy, somehow frozen in space and time. When weather conditions are exactly right, the action is played back, like a recording.
You were saying about poltergeists? Poltergeists are usually associated with an individual. Hauntings seem to be connected with an area. A house, usually.
People have been seeing and hearing ghosts for thousands of years. Soon, we may know how and why. What a tremendous gain that would be for science, and what a tremendous loss for storytelling.
Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker here.
I'm sorry to differ with you, sir, but you are the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker. I should know, sir. I've always been here.
Welcome back, guys.
Welcome back from the break.
Thanks for sticking around. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it a lot.
You know who else appreciates it?
Who's that,
That
Chris?
creepy shepherd boy, water stained demon that's staring at me on the ceiling.
What are you talking
Right
about?
there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I see it.
People of Earth, the listeners out there.
Ew, that's creepy.
We'll put this on the website. This is terrifying.
It's a real sign of poltergeist activity.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But I've been watching this water stain develop over the past couple of weeks, which is, I should probably tell our landlord about this, but it has turned
Yeah,
into this face of what looks like one of those porcelain, creepy porcelain dolls of like a shepherd boy with
Yeah,
like
what
just
are-
the black eyes. You guys know what I'm talking about, some of you.
What are those dolls called?
Yeah, they're like
Precious
collectors.
Moments?
Yeah,
or
something like that. But it's that face and it's just staring at me.
two little black. It's weird that the eyes are like black.
I know, that's what's freaky
There's
about
like
it.
there's like a brown outline of the head, and then
Yeah, you
there's
can.
like these
You can
two
see
little.
that. It's got ear. It's got its neck. It's got its chin. It's got its. Yeah, we'll put a picture up.
We'll put a picture on the show notes. Make sure to check out our website, beliefful.com, and you'll see this creepy. What's creepy too is like you just see like his head, the outline of his head and his eyes, and then he's like hiding behind. So we have one of those ceilings that's like these drop tiles. You know, those like white drop tiles you see like
Drop
a
ceiling.
classroom. Yeah, drop ceiling. And so like one of the tiles, it's like forming on the bottom of this tile, so it looks like he's just peeking out from
know.
behind a tile.
He's here for
Creepy.
Halloween.
Yeah, that adds to the mystique of the time of the season.
Yeah, I don't like it. It makes me feel weird when I look into his soulless eyes.
Yeah.
Well, that ties in with our topic today, I guess.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting finishing off the remainder of this episode without our long lost older brother who's passed on.
Passed on to Austin, Texas.
Yes, not
momentarily.
Where the dead live.
Momentarily, but not forgotten.
Although to our listeners, he's not gone because he was just here. But for us, it's been like, what, a week since we
Something like that.
recorded?
So he's gone, but not forgotten.
He's gone but not forgotten. And we will conclude this without him, but he will be back on the next episode.
Reincarnated in the shop. So let's get back to the topic at hand, which is...
So Ghost Bro.
So it's interesting, we kind of touched on this in the beginning, the idea of the different kind of, hauntings, experiences with quote unquote ghosts.
Spectral phenomena.
Are they disembodied spirits of the dead? Are they? As you keep mentioning, demons?
Well, yeah, I think there's a distinction between the possibility of those that have left here but have not quite made it to the hereafter, that are somewhere in between in that limbo space.
Let's set some parameters.
All right, let's
because I feel like you have the different sorts of encounters, right? You have the spectral anomaly where you see something for a moment and it's gone, like a shape, a vague image of something or a sensation. And you have things where you see something very visual and maybe auditory, where you're hearing things that can't be explained away by some sort of hallucination or bad goat meat that you've eaten previously in the night.
Change in the barometric pressure, stepping on a ley line, those energetic booby traps.
Right. It's a whole other topic.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that there's potentially different phenomena that's happening here. Like, I think growing up, watching Scooby-Doo, and I think, you have a concept at that point that's like a person that's passed away, that's wearing a sheet or dangling chains.
Well,
but
didn't they? I mean, sorry to break in, but I mean, Scooby-Doo was kind of it was the skeptic's ghost cartoon.
That's kind of
Wasn't
true,
it always
yeah.
some meddling kids in a costume?
You kids, if it weren't for you kids,
Did
I
they
would have
ever
gotten
have-
away with it too.
Did they ever have episodes where they kind of left it hanging?
Oh,
Where
like
it was like, oh, maybe. I think they did.
Yeah, I
think
feel
'cause-
like at the end of the episode, because they would catch Farmer McGregor, who was like trying to scare off the corporate realty interests on his land to keep them from developing it, and then they'd catch him and like, oh, you're just up to no good with your ghost tricks and theatrics, and they'd catch him and he'd be all embarrassed, and then like afterwards, the ghost would reappear further down the road, and you realize, this is
or like it would be like a curmudgeon-y lighthouse keeper, and then you'd have like
they're all curmudgeon-y.
They take like the lamp that he had away from him that was full of like glow sticks or whatever, and then be like, oh, it was just me, curmudgeon-y McCurmudgeon, the lamp guy.
Very
The lamp
inventive
guy.
name, Chris.
Yeah. But and then like at the end,
lamp guy.
But then the real lighthouse ghost would come down the stairs, and then Shaggy and Scooby would run away and get stoned.
Yeah,
And then they'd end the episode like that.
and eat a lot of food. They're always hungry.
Scooby snacks.
Yeah, so that's the typical. That's like you grow up, the first idea you have of ghosts is just someone that's passed away that hasn't moved on, that's trying to maybe connect with the living still or has unfinished business, which I think can account for some
absolutely.
phenomena. But I think the argument that certain people have, especially people that are more hard-nosed religious or have a strict Christian standpoint on it, or a certain bent of Christianity.
Or you're going to the demon thing.
The demon thing. And it doesn't have to be just Christianity. It's any people that look at this phenomena as being demonic, as being evil, as being dark and not light, as being a kind of entity that lives alongside of
the
us.
Japanese, demons, spirits are a big part of their culture.
Oh yeah.
Too.
Oh, they have a really advanced lore about.
Really is. Actually, that was going to bring me to my next point. The concept, because we talk about poltergeists, right? And the idea of this phenomenon where there will be a house where there's a lot of activity all of a sudden out of nowhere, and it seems to escalate, and things are flying around. Then it seems to dissipate and kind of dies off, and then the place is dead, pardon the pun, for like a decade or two, where there's no activity, and then it comes up again. And I've heard this theory. It's the concept that there's an energy in a place, or potential energy in a place, and we have certain kinds of people in those places. Whether it's a young person with a lot of hormones things going on. You hear that idea a lot. Or whether it's someone who's more psychically in tune. There are these potential spirits that are wandering by. And to them, it's like they see like a ball in a field. Like that potential kinetic energy, that potential spiritual energy is just sitting there, and they see it. And to them, they just go over, and then the kind of analogies, they
start to kick the ball.
They kick it around. They basically just like create chaos for fun. And then when they get bored, they move on. And that's an interesting, I think, concept when it comes to poltergeist activity. They can kind of explain that. But why it reminds me of the Japanese cultures, because there is this idea where there's this sort of correlation between places in Japan and places on the earth that tie into certain spirits, certain demonic presences, certain, where it's this global thing, which I always thought was interesting, because the idea that whether it's spirits of the dead or whether it's entities from another realm that are visiting these places, we think of them as haunted houses, like it must be something that happened in this location. But what if it's more of this like spiritual Oregon Trail, where like after death or when you die, you're somehow entangled in these other dimensions. And maybe there's spirits over there or entities over there that were never human but exist. And maybe they're not demonic or angelic, but maybe they just exist and they somehow interact with us at certain times and they live parallel to us, but they're going along on a parallel plane to ours. And once in a while they hit a certain access point or node, and that's when you get these experiences of haunted places, especially ones that are recurring over generations, where it's, silent for years and then kicks up again. What if it's just like a traveling post? What if it's just like an inn, like a warm inn on the road in the spiritual dimension?
So this would be specifically poltergeist activity, not like a visual recurrence, like you talked earlier about the stone tape theory, where it's stored memory of a certain
right. Yeah, I mean, it could still be visual. I think it could still be visual, but it wouldn't be a recurring the same.
And it wouldn't be like someone dressed in like Civil War clothing.
Right.
It would be, if it was visual, it'd probably be like a shadow person.
Yeah, unless
you
had a Union soldier showing up in like a Spanish cathedral. Then you'd be like, oh, they were traveling along their astral path because they obviously weren't where their origin is.
Yeah, but now you're suggesting that these entities that are traveling on this plane and want to kick the ball in the field are the dead?
Maybe. That's what I'm saying. Like,
but why?
What do you mean why? Well, we don't know, but I think it's an interesting concept to imagine. Like, let's say part of the haunting phenomenon is lost souls for whatever reason.
Okay.
Let's say someone passes on.
I'll entertain that.
Entertain it. Let's say someone passes on and then they see the bright light and for whatever reason they're like, fuck no, I'm not going in there. Maybe they're terrified of a judgment, or maybe they're just confused on what that is, but they decide not to venture in. And
or so they're lured away.
Or they're lured away by some other entity that already exists in this dimension. Possible. So in those situations, what if it is this wandering that begins? And who's to say it's tied to certain, only one place in your after-death experience? What if it's this continuous open world, for all you gamers out there, an open world map, where you're a spirit, you die, and then, it doesn't have to be the Beetlejuice idea, where you can't leave the house because there's giant sandworms that are going to eat you. Like, what if it is an open world map where you can go where you please, maybe in a confused way, but maybe that's why you find people that show up in certain places. For example, like our house, where we have things that have happened throughout the years.
Yeah, that's true.
In an unexplained way. I haven't seen a disembodied spirit of a dead person, but the poltergeist activity, definitely. Things moving, plastic cups flying across the room, hitting my TV. Trophies broken, how rude. Our basketball trophies.
Did you tell that story?
I don't think I told that one.
Because people are probably hearing that and be like, what are you talking about?
Well, we played sports when we were younger before we found out we were not super inclined to the sports. We were watching a documentary, and I think we were probably in 4th grade, and we heard tapping on the window. And we paused the documentary, and we heard tapping again. So we got up and we walked down the hall of our room, which had these little hallways going to the windows on either side of the house, and found, do you remember this, Jared? We found 2 broken basketballs from basketball trophies that had been broken, snapped off, and the trophies originated from the other side of the room. So our conclusion was that somehow those basketballs had been snapped off the trophy on one end of the room and then thrown against the window. And
hence the tapping, right?
Hence the tapping. So yeah, we've had these phenomena in our house, and we spoke about things before, like John had the refrigerator door opening and closing in the basement.
You have that cup thrown at you when you were younger.
Yeah, and so to me, it's interesting. And
that always seemed more like an anomaly of physics. Like, I always felt like there was some sort of, remember you hear the stories of like those stones in the desert that are traveling over a period of time, and there's like aerial photos of these like tracks behind these stones.
I think they've explained it.
Probably, but
they have an explanation.
It reminded me of that. It reminded me of this idea that like things can be affected in our reality because of some aberration of dimensions of dimensional physics, and that there are things that just jump, disappear, move from time to time, and there's glitches in the system, glitches in the matrix. And I always felt like our house was that. It never felt like there was a presence. I never got a feeling of a haunting, but there were just weird stuff that would happen from time to time.
Except for the shadow person that
you did
attacked me in my bedroom. That was pretty intense.
Did you say it looked like an alien?
No.
Oh, I thought it was like...
No, I never said that.
Okay.
It was a dark shadow figure. I told that story too. But my point being, what if these are things just that happen to come across our home? What if our home just happens to sit on some sort of Oregon Trail of the dead, or Oregon Trail of spirit energy that, like, once in a while you get these? And
the trail of fears, if you will.
Oh, it's really bad. I'm sorry.
Oh, I guess that was bad.
But going back to your idea about the physics thing, I always wondered that, and that was my initial thought. Like, was it because it didn't make sense to me? Our house was not built on a graveyard. It was a brand new home when it was being built right before we purchased the land. So the only history we know of that place is that it was built on a dumping ground. So who knows what was thrown into the swamps before our land was filled in and the house was built on top. Who knows?
Right.
Could have been bodies. You had Rogues Hollow only half a mile away. There could have been people just, bodies hidden in the swamps. Like, that's totally possible.
Right. Well, Rogues Hollow is a kind of a legendary haunted place that is right near where we live that we'll probably get into in a future episode.
Yeah, I'd love
Much
to do that.
John's chagrin, because John would like to just jump back into more conspiracy related
We can
stuff,
mix it
which
up.
we will.
Yeah, but my
Oh, he dropped his beer. Oh, how awkward. He dropped his beer.
that's something new. It'll dry. But my point being was like, so it never made sense to me that like we had a haunted house because someone died there. It didn't make sense to me. And like, sure, maybe there was a body displaced from an unresolved murder.
I always thought that there was a previous contractor that worked on the house that was buried in the walls.
Oh God, that's terrifying.
I know. I don't know why I thought that. I think because when we got the house, it was unfinished.
Never look at mom and dad's house the same. But so it never really made sense to me that it was a haunted house because it was so infrequent. And that's why I go back to the idea of either like we're situated on some sort of anomalous pathway, like we're just a node, like you were saying, a node that just happens to intersect dimensionally with things that share our plane, or like a separate plane, but in the same sort of geography, I guess.
So it's kind of like an oasis in the desert of the spiritual plane.
Not even an oasis, but like let's assume
for some reason they're drawn to it, is what you're saying. In these places that are
there's a
haunted,
connection spot. And maybe it's because when those things occurred, we were all like John's experience. He was a teenager. Both of our experiences that we had there, we were preteens. So maybe there's something to do with that energy. Maybe it is that, and if it's not spiritual or supernatural, maybe, like the physical thing too, like two realities bumping up against each other, and it just caused like one item in a geographical area to be displaced for a second. Like I thought that too, because the idea of the house being haunted didn't make sense until I had my shadow person encounter. And then I was like, okay, maybe there's something more to this than like a physical anomaly,
right?
Quantum physical shift or something. But yeah, so who knows? I mean, I think there's a menagerie. Let's go back to that beautiful word. This
is all hither and thither. I think that I think looking into this stuff, you see that you can't box this phenomena into a single explanation. Like everything that is supernatural, seemingly to us, we can't say, well, that's ghosts and that's ghosts. When you look deeper into these phenomena, you realize there are parallels, there are consistencies that thread through the experiences, but a lot of times they diverge. And when they diverge, they become consistent with other phenomena, and you realize that you can break this down into something. And I think, when you talk about the feeding off of the fear, this kind of malignant malice that you feel in certain situations where it seems like the more fear you give it, the bigger it grows, and it doesn't seem to be connected to any sort of lost loved one. And then you hear about the trickster spirits, right? And this goes back to the jinn, right, from the ancient Muslim belief systems, even back to Zoroastrianism, like the idea that like there are these spirits that are trickster spirits. And you play that forward today where you have these hauntings, and like the Annabelle doll, right, from Ed and Lorraine Warren.
That was one of their investigations.
Annabelle, the original idea was it originally belonged, I think we should look this up, but I think it was to a group of
college students, I think.
Couple college students, couple girls, right, that lived in an apartment. And I don't remember if they played with a Ouija board. I mean, the specifics don't really matter for my point. My point is they invited the spirit of what they thought was this girl to inhabit this doll. Right, because it wanted to connect with them.
Yeah.
They invited it in, and it claimed to be like the spirit of a young girl, but it was a spirit of a human child, and it needed a place to be. And they're like, well, you're welcome. We invite you in, just like the old vampire.
It's like all those
must be invited in. There's a will. You must
get through the threshold somehow.
You must give your will. You must give up your will to these things. And that's interesting. That is that consistent.
Even like signing a deal with the devil.
Right.
You got to sign on the dial.
You have to make that decision, that choice.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like with the Annabelle thing, like they invited this thing in, and then shortly after they realized this wasn't the spirit of a girl.
Right.
Like,
you hear that all the time. You hear
it was a trick. It was a demonic. And when I say demonic, like automatically it's applied to Christianity, which I'm fine with, but you have people that are turned off by a certain terminology. All of this gets extrapolated back to a greater reality, which is light and dark, good and evil, negative, positive. And
Yeah.
these are negative forces,
Although
whatever you want to call them.
I would argue, and yes, negative, but I would argue there are more benign trickster spirit stories.
Yeah, I think there are
cross-culturally
different neutral spirits that
where they're just messing with you.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's true.
Probably to get they're getting their paradimensional kicks.
Right.
By watching you try to figure out what's going on, where it's not necessarily like they want to send you to some sort of brimstone hell.
Right.
But maybe it's just that they're having fun with you and they like to see you freaking out, trying to figure out. Because think about it. I mean, like even on the basic level, if you're an invisible dude walking around, you see a bunch of people who can't see you, you can see them. You're guaranteed there's going to be asshole trickster spirits that are going to want to just mess with you. Think of how many people we've met throughout our lives who are just dicks. And if they had the chance to be invisible and just mess with people, it might not be some evil agenda, but they just want to like laugh at your fear.
Right.
So I think that's a possibility too.
We can't limit, if these things are, whatever we're experiencing, a phenomena from a reality that we don't fully understand, to limit it to something
nobody knows.
Right. I think you can probably accurately define some of this.
Yeah, and you can
just
examine it.
by measuring it and categorizing it.
Yeah.
That's true. But the basic understanding of just like, this is a ghost, this is a demon, or whatever.
Right.
I think we're tripped up with language.
Yeah, and this is the thing. A lot of these things that we talk about on the show, you were saying earlier, everything seems to be tied together in some way. But like you think about like trickster spirits, then you start to talk about jinn, or you talk about there's fox spirits in Japan that seem a little less. I mean, they cause you potential harm or disruptions in your life, but maybe not to the degree of like some sort of soul-sucking hellacious kind of thing, but they might take you away from, your timeline for a bit of period of time and bring you back where everybody's dead. And it rolls into those are stories you hear about those
intense.
kinds. Yeah, but I mean it's the same kind of idea with fairies where you get sucked away, and then all that ties into UFOs and alien abduction. Like all these things seem to cycle around, and I think there are situations, don't get me wrong, I think there are examples of situations where you can kind of categorize and say like this falls into this category of poltergeist, and what is a poltergeist we're not quite sure, but in these parameters this makes sense that we would put that in that category. Right. And then where the opposite might be like a Bigfoot sighting or something. Right. But I think all these things are tied together on some level. It's this idea of the seemingly unexplainable phenomenon that have been unexplainable for centuries, and even with scientific evolution we're still not driving nails through. And we're going to do an episode on Skinwalker Ranch, but that was an example of, a government-sanctioned investigation of a property that was experiencing many of these phenomenons all in one place, and a menagerie, if you will. And so many of these experiences were going on. Poltergeist activity, abnormally large wolf creatures who can't be killed with bullets, skinwalkers. You had lights in the sky. You had things crawling out of portals, all in one location. So these, I think if you look hard enough, if you're someone who's really into this stuff and you're, an armchair researcher like we are, I think you can see, I think it's pretty plain to see that all of these things are connected on some level. And I think it's interesting that they all seem just as elusive, like almost equilaterally elusive. I think that's kind of fascinating. Like, is there something about the phenomenon itself of being unknown that just keeps you just a little bit away from the reality of what these things are? Maybe that's part of our...
There might be something with the nature of the reality that we live in that we can never really understand it from our perspective.
Maybe it's just part of the human condition. Maybe it's part of a simulation. Maybe it's just, some things aren't to be known by the human mind. I don't know, but it's fascinating.
That whole concept of even UFOs blipping in and out of our reality. And the idea that if it is another dimension that they're just passing through, like a... let's say a pipe passing through a sheet of paper. If you are
that happens all the time.
I mean, I stick.
It's a really bad example. How about a bobber on the surface of water?
No, I don't think so. Well, I mean, I don't see how that works in my brain.
Because if you're a fish and you're looking up, and then a bobber comes down, and all of a sudden you see this
pop in and out.
You see
let me do mine. Let me do mine. Okay, so you're a stick figure person on a sheet of paper.
That's offensive.
You live in a 2D world, a two-dimensional world on this piece of paper, right? And a pipe or some lengthy object penetrates the piece of paper that you're living on. I don't mean to get sexual. And it passes through the paper. And as it passes through the paper, you see a circle, you see a dot, a light, whatever it would be, a two-dimensional thing on your piece of paper, because that's all you can see. You can't see the fuller object moving through it, right? So there's no way from your 2D perspective that you will ever be able to define and understand what you're seeing because you're seeing a piece of something from a higher dimension.
You'll never know what a pipe is, basically, is what you're saying.
Right. If you're a 2D guy,
Why is a pipe going through a sheet of
piece of paper? It doesn't matter.
It's such a weird.
It's happening. Why are UFOs? You know.
Right.
So what I'm saying is like it's just a phenomenon that we can only observe from our perspective, but we have to realize with all humility that we have a limited perspective, and I think that's how we should approach all of these things.
No, I think you're right, and I think not to just reiterate exactly what you said with a more colorful analogy.
I think that was very colorful.
But this is for all the fishermen out there. Randall, if you're listening.
What's a bobber in the water?
Yeah, okay, let's say you're a fish and you're swimming around and you look up. I don't know if fish can look up. Maybe they just tilt their bodies. But then you're observing the surface of the water from below, and all of a sudden this half sphere drops into the water. And you're like, whoa, that's a half sphere. What's it doing? Where did it come from? There's nothing above that ceiling. And all of a sudden, this appears out of nowhere. It's not at all what it actually is, but to you, it appears like this half circular thing. And of course, you've got a fish brain, so you can't really comprehend
it. It's like a
it.
moon to you.
Yeah, but in reality, it's just a bobber. It's an indicator for some entity living in another dimension, basically, dropping in something to indicate to them that they might catch you and eat you. I think it's a very colorful analogy to that. I hope that makes sense. I heard that somewhere 10 years ago.
That's very bad. Okay. I'm going to stick with the
it's better than a pipe through piece of paper.
I think that was great.
When do you see pipes going through paper?
Well, that was a.
You could have said pencil.
That was an extrapolation of an earlier analogy I heard years ago about.
It was bad.
Okay, cool. Pencil would have been better. I'm sorry, I could not think of a lengthy, hard object at the moment.
That's what your girlfriend said.
No, I don't like that.
That's kind of good.
But yeah, on that point, I think we've broken down this concept in probably an exasperated fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much ground to cover, and it's like we're nearing Halloween and we didn't get to cover you're not going to get to the end.
But we have another story to play.
We got a couple stories.
And we have a little bit of wrap up to do at the end, and we want to get in a little bit of the Enfield Poltergeist and Ed and Lorraine Warren. I think it's a fascinating little tidbits to touch on.
Yeah.
Before we say Happy Halloween.
So stick around for after the break.
Stick around. It's going to be great, and we're going to wrap it up. Right, John? I promise it's going to be great.
Sounds good, guys.
Why are you guys promising things again?
Guys are so much cooler than me.
That sounds just like John.
I think that was John.
Weird. Neat. It's not the same without the sound effects. All right, guys, we'll see you after the next break, and stick tuned and stay with us.
Jeremy's drunk.
Stay tuned and stick with us, is what I meant to say.
Well, getting back into the spirit of things, you want to go to our first call of the night?
Let's do it.
All right, Brian from Ypsilanti.
Who's Brian's?
Brian's. Let's hear what he has to say.
Well, hello, fellas. This is Brian, all the way up in Ypsilanti, Michigan. You know where that is, right? It's the place that you guys don't visit anymore. Well, I know you're doing an episode on hauntings, and I think my apartment might be haunted. I guess to make a long story short, or at least to the point, one day I was cooking some dinner, probably a Middle Eastern dish, and I did have a couple beers, so take that into consideration. But
delegitimize
out of the corner of my eye, I think I may have seen a entity in my bathroom. There was some light dimming and what looked like little power glitches for a second. I heard noises thinking that somebody was here. I actually thought my girlfriend had come home and she was nowhere to be found. So in the middle of cooking, I looked over, and through a reflection, I thought I saw somebody standing in my bathroom. So I went over to investigate. Of course, the hair was already standing up all over me because I have hair all over me.
That's
and
true. It's a hairy man.
Came around the corner and there was nobody in there. But as I turned the corner, I have a fish tank that lives at the end of the hall. and the fish were acting a little bizarre. They were sort of darting around the tank, doing things that they don't normally do. I see them every day. I watch them all the time, and I guess chalked it up to thinking maybe there was some sort of electrical surge that put a current or something through the water. That was my best idea. So I've kept some of these things from my girlfriend. Other little things like doors opening and shutting on their own. And one day I brought it up to her, and she told me about 3 or 4 different stories along the same lines where she felt like somebody was here and they weren't. She even called out for me, and I wasn't there. She's had doors open and shut on her. She's had a lot of these little moments too. So I thought I would just throw my little 2 cents in there and give you something to think about, maybe a reason to come up sometime. Door's always open for you. It just, I might not be the one that opens it. Hey. Anywhoosies.
Jeez.
I miss you guys. I love the show. And, yeah, come see me sometime. It's an old-ass building, and you can bring your equipment and try to record it or scare it away or hang out with it, whatever you want to do. But other than that, things are good. Love you, boys.
That was adorable.
That was a great little story.
That was good. That was good. Yeah.
I feel like he made it up just so we come up and hang out with him. I really want to go back up to Ypsi, spelunker up to Ypsilanti, Michigan, and stay with him, because it would be awesome to go up there with some equipment and do a little field recording.
Right. Yeah. I talked to our friends over at Phantom Faction Podcast and got some tips on, the
great show, Phantom Faction Podcast. If you guys haven't checked that out yet, go to Phantom Faction Podcast on any podcast player.
But yeah, I know they're anxious for us to come up and just visit. So that would just be a little icing on the paranormal cake.
Yeah. What did you talk to Phantom Faction about?
Oh, just get some tips on doing an investigation.
Oh, yeah,
We've never really done, we're armchair researchers,
right.
We say way too often. But
well, you say it too often. You just said it earlier in the episode.
Anyway, so as I sit in this armchair researching, I was thinking, yeah, well, it's funny because when I got a message from Brian a few weeks ago, and he said something to the effect of, well, I am pretty certain my apartment is haunted. And I responded saying, I don't want to be glad for this, but I can't help but be a little bit excited. We grew up with this guy. He's a fan of the show, but he's also a longtime friend, one of my oldest friends, and he was always into strange things as well. And I think he once threatened to punch somebody in a bar because they said they were mocking people that didn't believe in Bigfoot.
That did believe in Bigfoot. They were talking smack. They were talking smack about Bigfoot.
Right.
And
he really wanted to turn around.
It took every bit of my essence not to turn around and smash him in the nose.
What a ridiculous response.
What a champion of Sasquatch.
Yes,
that's awesome. We should get him a t-shirt that just says champion of Sasquatch.
Oh, we'll do it.
We will do that.
We were in this club where we looked for ghosts and, monsters in the woods.
Was that the Creek Club?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Our special club?
Yeah, we'd go in the woods around town, in the outskirts of town, and try to find monsters.
The outskirts of town. It was literally in the woods behind our house. We couldn't even ride bikes
we were
at that point.
6 inches tall, so it was a pretty far jog.
That's true.
But yeah, fascinating story. I really, I think one of the most intriguing parts about the story, when he told to me before over the phone, the response of these fish. When this activity is going on in the house, it's almost like, it's funny because you always hear cats and dogs and sort of responses, but fish, which is funny because they're really sensitive to electrical energy. Fish.
Oh, is that true?
I think so.
Do you know a fish that's very sensitive? There's like he's triggered by electrical currents in the room?
Right, something to do with bioelectrical stuff.
Well, they're in conductive fluid. So maybe...
Yeah. Well, and think how thin their skin is.
There are some fish that actually use electricity, right? Mm-hmm. To zap their enemies.
Mm-hmm. Or light up the deep seas with a little bulb.
That's like bioluminescence. Is that
anyway, we're getting off topic. But good story from Brian.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you hear that a lot. You hear like, well, I didn't want to scare my partner about things that I've been seeing. And then you find out that they've been experiencing the same thing. Similar to, I think in the next story coming up, there's a similar situation where the person involved had certain encounters and then didn't say anything and then found out later that it was actually happening to a lot of people, right?
Right, you get the confirmation from other people.
It's interesting when it coalesces like that. It's good evidence.
Yeah, and it would be cool to go up there and check out that place because it is a really old building. I think it was one of the earliest buildings built in downtown Ypsilanti. He talks about those doors that are opening and closing. He was describing to me before that there are these...
I said that so subtly. It's like, and there's other stuff like doors opening and closing. I'd be like, yeah, that would be enough for me to be freaked out.
These doors are big, heavy doors, according to his account, and they all seem to go into this one room. Like 4 doors go into this. It was probably some sort of office space or something. But he said, they're built turn of the century, really heavy wooden oak doors.
Right.
That, take some effort to. So it'd be fun to go up there and check it out. I mean, really, it would be just fun to go see him. But
we'll take you up on it, Brian.
Yeah.
And I miss you too, you furry little animal.
Anyway, yeah, thank you guys for that story. I'll be looking forward to coming up.
I know. I love when people send in their stories.
I know we need more of them.
Yes, more. Send in more. Friends, family, fans. That story from Brian, it sounds like, if you're going to classify that, it would be poltergeist activity.
Yeah, I mean, there sounds like there might be some shadow person stuff involved there, but definitely some bona fide poltergeist maneuverings.
It's interesting. Have you heard of the Enfield poltergeist case?
Yes, that was the one in England.
It was I'm sure there are more than one in England.
One of the more famous.
Yeah. Well, The Conjuring
60s
2
or something, 1960s.
I think it was The Conjuring 2 was based off of.
Oh, right.
That James Wan film that was really good. If you guys haven't seen
Those are good series usually.
Yeah.
The like offshoot ones where he's just executive producer are not great. Like the first Annabelle was dog poo. Let me tell you what.
I did not see it.
I went with my girlfriend at the time and we laughed through the whole movie. They did like a kind of a different version of it later on, which was actually good. But that first one was garbage. No offense.
I will not check it out. But yes, no, the first Conjuring was awesome. And the Conjuring series is about Ed and Lorraine Warren. Was a real life set of
ghost-busting couples.
Yes, a ghost-busting couple. Investigators. They came out from kind of a Catholic exorcising of demon kind of bent.
Right. I think she was a medium, right?
She was, but I don't think that I saw an interview with her and she said that Ed never really recognized that. And she didn't really become aware of it till much later.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, it was kind of interesting. I think they did a little differently in the film. But anyways, yeah, the second Conjuring was about the Enfield poltergeist case, which is a real case.
Right, whether or not it was actual paranormal activity going on, or I know that there's a lot of controversy around that case being faked. Isn't there the one where there's like girls, looks like they're flying through the air, snapshot,
it's supposed to be levitating, but
could be jumping off a bed.
Yeah, there have been people that have done photographic analysis and said like, well, you can see their muscles contracting, so you can tell that they were jumping. But that's interesting because
that's intense.
Yeah. So this case, like, Google it if you guys are out there. And it's not just us talking to ourselves on these microphones. Google it and look up Enfield Poltergeist if you want to hear some really creepy. We're actually going to play this. We're going to play some really creepy clips that are audio recordings of vocalizations from one of the daughters in the family of the Enfield Poltergeist case named Janet. And she's taken over by the voice of, claims to be the ghost of Bill, which is someone who died in the house.
Right. Now, is it at the end of this investigation? Was it supposedly really a dead person, or was it sort of an entity pretending?
Well, that's what's kind of murky. I think that it seems like it's a dark, malevolent entity. I mean, the idea is that that it's Bill, like this person who had died in the house.
He had his favorite chair or something. I remember.
Yeah, that he died in the chair, and you'll hear that in the audio clip. It's really creepy.
Not a bad place to die.
Yeah, but before we get to those details, we'll touch on that after we play the clip. But I just wanted to set it up a little bit, the story of the case. So
Go for it.
So in the Enfield Poltergeist case, it was a mother and her 4 children, Peggy Hodgson, and when they had moved into this house, they had, I don't know if it's when they just moved in, but there was a divorce. The dad wasn't in the picture. There was a lot of tension in the home.
Okay, yeah.
But this was in North London.
Sounds like it's following the pattern.
Yeah, that idea of like some kind of dark entity that's attracted to negative energy.
Yeah.
And is feeding off of that.
Plus you got the young kids thrown in for good measure.
Exactly. And so I guess in this situation, being in the home, the girls would distract themselves from the tension in the family or the sadness of having kind of a broken home by playing with a Ouija board.
Oh.
So let's
Here we go.
invite the spirits. So that's kind of a compelling tidbit, an anecdote that might explain how this whole thing got going for them. You know, how the activity began. So it started with things missing in the house. There was a teapot that went missing and some other kind of small items that disappeared. And eventually the bed began to levitate. They had dressers moved in the house. They had a dresser that moved to block the door and actually kept the family from being able to leave the bedroom. I think that was probably the first really intense experience that they had in the house.
Wait, so was this these alleged events that were occurring? Was it was more than just the kids alleging these? The parents were alleging this stuff happening.
Remember,
too?
the dad's not in the home; it's just the mom.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, the mother ended up having a nervous breakdown, but she did actually stay in the house for the rest of her life until she died.
Oh, that's weird.
And interestingly, when she died, the new family that moved in only lasted 2 months. So
did they claim that it was because of spectral encounters?
Yeah,
or?
so the phenomena lasted between 1977 and 1979. That's when the big hoopla was for the Enfield Poltergeist, because this was a big case. Even the BBC went there to try to record it.
I remember that.
But none of their film was usable, or most of it was corrupted.
What about that documentary?
I'm not sure if that was from the BBC or if it was from another one, but
they look pretty fake.
If you look it up on YouTube, you can find that footage.
Because it was all scripted, so I don't know if it was like
it wasn't scripted.
It was like a docudrama.
No, I don't think so.
Really? It seemed scripted to me. Maybe I'm thinking of a different one.
It was very it felt very produced in like that 1970s kind of style.
Like when the guy was there, like investigating.
That guy, his name is Maurice Grosse, and he was supposedly a serious researcher that was adamant till the day he died that it was a real case, even though he admitted that the girls were kind of acting up, like hyping some stuff, and like he said they like to play tricks at times. Which
that really muddies the waters.
It does, but you also have to. So Janet, the girl who you'll hear, her vocal cords are being used to create the voice of Bill, right? Like supposedly Bill talking through her, or this demon that pretends to be Bill, or whatever it is.
Kind of like Brent Spiner in Independence Day.
Exactly like that, Chris. What was I saying?
Sorry.
No, but yeah, that girl, Janet, years later, I think there's a video of this online, but I just read an article about it, but she admitted that up to 2% of the activity were the kids like having fun with it, like trying to like build it up.
2%?
Think about being like a kid, being a little kid, and you have all this media attention. And,
right, yeah.
You know, why wouldn't you have, part of you would have that kid kind of attitude.
Part
of
you'd want it to keep going.
Especially if you started this by playing with Ouija boards and you were, interested in that. Like, who knows what kids are going to do, but there's just some stuff that is very hard to explain. And I've heard the argument made that this lasted for 18 months. This activity of like monitored, like things being thrown, voice being made, and there are outside people monitoring this. Like, how are if the kids are extremely successful illusionists, maybe, that they were doing it for that long of a time.
Yeah.
There's some of the compelling evidence that you just can't wash away with that kind of like,
Well, and what you said it makes sense to me, kind of like the idea that they're young kids and like this kind of fantastic magical thing is happening where, this invisible force is moving things around. And maybe initially, it wasn't scary maybe at first. And, you're not going to know as kids, like the consequences of this kind of thing. You don't know the story. So your parents aren't going to tell you about, accounts of demonic possession when you're a toddler, But, it reminds me of that scene from the Poltergeist when the guy, what's his name? Coach.
Yeah,
he's, when the things first start happening in their home, they like this chair keeps moving across the kitchen, but it's always going at the same time and it's going the same distance. So they put like a chalk circle on the beginning and the end.
Oh, really?
And then like an X where it ends. And then they put their daughter on the circle with a football helmet on. And then the invisible force just moves her to the end and then they pick her up. So like,
I remember that scene. Yeah.
Initially, like if you don't jump to the conclusion initially that it's spiritual, or that if it is spiritual, it's not necessarily, something that's evil.
Right.
Maybe you're like, oh, this is fun. So you might want to play along with it, maybe add to it to be like, I get that.
And that doesn't necessarily, that doesn't detract from all of the evidence, going the other way, pointing that this might have been a real occurrence that was happening, something really paranormal. One of the things that would be really hard to dismiss from this case, Maurice Grosse. So Maurice Grosse was kind of the lead researcher of this. Ed and Lorraine Warren were there, but I think they only investigated for a brief time. But Maurice Grosse, he was a researcher from the Society of Psychic Research, which was I think fairly large in that arena of study in England at the time. But he did an experiment where he filled up the girl's mouth with water. Because remember, the voice is coming from her. And so he filled her mouth up with water to see if the voice would still come out. And it did. She still had Bill's voice speaking through her. And what they discovered is that her vocal cords weren't being used, like her main vocal cords. Yeah, it turned out that the voice wasn't coming from her main vocal cords, but from what are called false vocal cords that were being activated, being vibrated to make the sound.
That's it.
I know because I know you're going to tie that in. But before you say that, these false vocal cords are like bands of ligament, and they play like a little role in the production of sound. But if you were going to talk use that, when you're speaking, you could do it for like maybe 10 minutes before you start to get really sore. And she would do it up to 4 hours at a time. And after all the time that Maurice Grosse was there recording her, it was like 180 hours of compiled audio recordings of talking to Bill.
But is that something you need to be trained to do? How do you talk with, can I try it real quick? I have water.
What?
I just want to try to see if I can do it. Try to talk with water in your mouth.
Sure, go ahead.
I can't, I'm trying to imagine what that would be, what it feel like. Hold on.
Yeah, as you're getting the water, I'm going to say too, because When you'll hear their voice, we're going to play the clip in just a second here. You can hear it sounds like the mouth is open. You can sound, the sounds that you would make when you're speaking open. I'm not like I've never studied ventriloquism or anything like that, but it just sounds like it's not a closed mouth. It's not covered in water. I mean, it's just ridiculous to think.
It just sounds normal.
Yeah. So
right,
go ahead. Let's hear you do this.
What should I say?
This is a ridiculous idea.
I know. I want to know if it's possible. I'm going to do it. What should I say?
Say, mammoths dance in the sun of springtime.
Okay.
Really?
That's what it does. Wow, that's what it does.
Well,
You're pushing air out. I guess that makes sense. You're pushing
I
out.
think the argument would be that it would be like you're just vibrating, somehow making the sound. I don't know.
Well, I'm not.
Anyways, that was a wonderful test.
Sorry, that was
probably not as impressive as
probably a little
Maurice Gross's water test.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it just happens to tie into our story coming up here with Nicole, because she talks about there's, I don't want to spoil it, but there's something that she hears that involves voices that potentially are coming not from a physical voice, but are using vibrations from other things to create a voice.
Right, a voice coming not from like seemingly the ether, but it's using items that
physical objects,
things
that
vibrating.
resonate.
Yeah, and that kinetic energy of the vibration is creating audible sound.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't heard that idea before.
That's so weird that it ties in like that.
Yeah.
And another thing that ties in. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and play this clip, and then we'll
go for it.
All right, this is from the Enfield Poltergeists. We'll put a link to this in the show notes on our website.
Let me hear you say my name. Come on, let me hear you say my name. That's not my name.
That was the demon thing or the girl?
Speaking through the girl, Janet. Trying to coax it.
Come on, my name's
Like a
Morris.
bark.
Let me hear you say it.
That's weird.
Morris. Say Dr. Belloc. Come on, let me hear you say that. Come on. Let's hear you say Dr. Belloc.
I think she's rocking in the chair.
Ugh.
Come on, if you squeak the bed, I can't hear you talking.
The bed.
Say Dr. Belloc.
Rocking the
Come on.
bed.
Come on, say it for me, Dr. Belloc.
Dr. Belloc.
Ugh. Yeah.
I want you to tell me whether you remember what happened to you when you died. Just before you died and just after you died.
This part's really creepy.
2 weeks before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in a corner downstairs.
Creepy.
Wow.
Why can't Janet sue you?
I'm invisible.
You're invisible. Why are you invisible?
So much H-O-S-T.
Weird. Ghost. So yeah, that sounded like an 11-year-old girl to me.
Yeah,
That's an 11-year-old girl.
11-year-old? Yeah.
You could say that she's throwing her voice and she's manipulating it to talk really low like this. But I mean,
There were some points in there, like I think to me the most, kind of bone-chilling statement that's made there is when they asked him how he died.
Yeah.
He said, I had a headache and I fell asleep in my chair downstairs.
no, he said a few days before I went blind, I had a hemorrhage.
Oh, is that what he says?
Yeah, a brain hemorrhage, and died in my chair downstairs.
That's creepy.
Yeah, and I think they looked that up, and that's how the previous
I
person died.
remember.
And whether or not that was actually the previous person speaking through, or potentially an entity using that
Pretending to be
information.
another trickster idea.
I mean, that's creepy. Like, yeah, you can always say hoax for sure.
Right.
But that is one of the more compelling audio recordings I've ever heard, especially since it's supposed to be from an 11-year-old girl.
Yeah.
You know?
And what's interesting is those bark sounds that you played. Okay,
that's what I want to bring up. I'm going to compare it because
when I was interviewing Nicole,
yeah,
with her ghost story, coming over on the headset, and she couldn't hear it, but on the headset, and it was being recorded on my end through the software, you could hear these. I mean, they were terrifying. You can kind of hear my voice because I think I'm going to leave a couple in the interview, but in my response, but it really it freaked me out to the point where I almost ended the interview because it was so, first of all, so off-putting because it was so loud in the headphones. But also these bark sounds, they didn't sound like technical glitches. They sounded, a little technical, but mostly there was an organicness to them.
Right.
And then they and they weren't the same. They weren't uniform. And like later as the interview went on, and maybe we'll play a couple clips if we have time and compare them in post, but these sounds would get lower in pitch and the frequency would change, but it always had this sort of human or animal kind of. Yeah, just bizarre. Well, it was terrifying when I was.
Well, you told me that this is because I discovered it. Well, I mean, I discovered it. You told that to me, and you'd played that for me, and it freaked me out a little bit. I was like, it could be a digital thing, but yeah, it did sound very organic in a weird way.
But yeah, you didn't hear the ones at the end. Those were the really organic sounding ones.
When you told me that, and then I came across this audio recording. It sounded surprisingly similar. So what I did is I took the scream, the digital kind of scream, that was real short.
It was in my headphones. Yeah.
So I put these next to each other because it sounded strikingly similar,
right,
in a way. Even though they referred to those as like barking.
Well, I think even in the interview, I don't know if I cut it out or if I left it in, but I think that's how I referred to it as a bark. As a bark.
Yeah. Okay, so this is interesting. So what I did, I took the one from your interview and I just pitched the tone a little bit down to match the basic tone of it.
Oh, the same,
to see how similar it was.
Yeah,
and here's what it sounds like. Sound pretty close?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's...
Play them again.
Yeah, that's really anecdotal, but it's just
and it's
weird.
Also, I mean, it's so fast. It's hard to tell.
They're both brief, like kind of just interjections of potential ghosts.
Maybe I'll play a couple more real quick right here of the ones that just in a row, the ones that I had with Nicole, and people can judge how they want. It was interesting how it came in to the story. It seemed to happen a lot when I was talking, and we would talk about something specific in the story. Like we would talk about she would hear the voice of a woman and then the scream.
Right.
It was just creepy.
Well, that's coming up next, right? We're going to get Nicole's story.
You know what? Are you ready to do that now?
Yeah, let's play that now. Do you want to go to break? Do a little break here. Let our listeners go to the bathroom.
Yeah, let's go to break.
Get a cup of water.
All right, guys, we'll stick around, and after the break, we will have Nicole's story. It's a good one.
Freaky as it is. Stay tuned.
So when I was living in Columbus, I worked at a restaurant, and I was the manager of the restaurant. So I was there pretty much all day, every day, and it was located in a historical building. The building itself was previously a factory, but then it had been gutted and turned into a hotel, and then the restaurant was on the bottom floor. This factory was outside of what used to be prison grounds, and then the prison grounds were demolished, and an arena was built on top of that. So I hadn't really noticed anything particular until maybe my second or third year, beyond some of the really minor stuff, like pockets of very cold and very hot places where it doesn't even make any sense because it's not like the ventilation is changing from 2 feet away or whatever. Things being misplaced, general feelings. I think that the service staff was maybe a little bit more affected by this than we realized at the time, because they would have these really weird emotional outbursts, and that didn't make any sense for grown people. Well, anyways, being the manager, I think it was a Friday night. I was there alone late at night, and I would do some late night work after all the service staff left, because I didn't have a car at the time, and sometimes I would wait for a bus. But the point being, I was there alone, and all of a sudden I started hearing people. And you know how when people are far away, particularly if they're over a wall or a window, it's mumbling, but you distinctly recognize it as being human voices talking. So I hear this almost conversation, and it's escalating, getting louder, like a fight. And then I hear a woman's blood-curdling scream.
Oh, did you hear that?
What?
When you said that, did you hear that?
Hear what?
Scream in the headphones?
No.
Oh, wow. I'm shivering right now. Oh, that's weird.
Okay.
What's that? You didn't hear that sound? Right as you said blood-curdling scream, a scream that got cut off. Really high-pitched, feminine I've never heard that before. You didn't hear that on your side?
No, I didn't. And I'm going to cry, actually.
That was scary. I'm feeling weird right now.
I know, because
Wow.
then the epilogue of my story, like, speaks a little to that. All right. Okay.
Oh, great. Oh, that was freaky. Creaking behind me all of a sudden was not happening earlier.
So getting back to the story.
Yes.
So I heard that. And so, of course, my brain jumped to the immediate first logical conclusion, right? Like that just on the street, on High Street, on the sidewalk, a couple was probably having some kind of a fight. And so for me, it's like, all right, do I need to call the police and have somebody come out and take care of this? Are the police going to see them anyways? Because they're in the middle of downtown, on the main street. This isn't happening in a vacuum. But just as I'm having that internal dialogue, and that happens so fast, I heard it louder, clearly. And so then I thought, did I not lock the door to the gallery? So I'm like racking my brain of, okay, great. Now these people are in here and like this woman is screaming bloody murder and this man is, whatever. I'm terrified. Like I'm literally terrified to leave the office. And I think to myself, just this feeling like something's not right and that it can't possibly be people. So I lock the door to the gallery because I can lock it from my side. I go down the hall. There's a door to the hallway. I close that. I lock it up as well, leaving like 45 minutes earlier than I had planned. Each step that I'm taking to my exit point, I'm feeling increasing anxiety. The screaming's no longer happening, but I know that something happened, and it's just making me feel uncomfortable. So I go into the kitchen of the restaurant where I generally feel safe because it's like away from the public, whatever. And there's a lot of thick walls. Like, I don't know. It's like a safe place to be. Everybody works. So then I take another seat. I'm still waiting for this bus. Professional kitchens have a lot of steel, like the stainless steel hoods of the ovens and the counters, like all of the counters are stainless steel,
right.
Like the prep stations and stuff. All of a sudden, something in the kitchen starts vibrating. More than that, not only is it vibrating, but it is vibrating because something was trying to speak through it. It was trying to vibrate different things in the kitchen to speak to me. And the vibrations in the kitchens started getting louder and louder, and I got the goosebumps on the back of my neck, and the hairs are raising all over my body. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice telling me to get out. And so the more scared I get, the more I try to tune out the voice because I know that it is scaring me. And it's talking then to me. It's like talking, but I'm like blocking out because I'm so terrified. I'm blocking out. I grab my stuff. I run to the door. I without even thinking, put on the alarm, close the door behind me, and I leave the restaurant shaking. This experience affected me so deeply that when I went back to work, I felt extremely embarrassed, but I went to the owner of the restaurant and the chef, and I told them that I had this experience and I feel crazy talking about it, but that it affected me so deeply that I refuse to leave the restaurant alone. And the chef thought, yeah, okay, whatever, and rolled his eyes. The owner was just like, okay, I hear you. She was on the side of acknowledging, yes, they're there, but no, they can't hurt you. So then the next time I went to one of my closing shifts, I finally had to designate somebody from the service team to stay with me so that I could continue do my closing activities in peace. So it must have been a Saturday night because everyone from the service staff was there. Everybody was required to work on Friday and Saturday. And I said, all right, guys, you all have had your shift drink. Everybody's tipped out. I'm like, look, one of you has to stay with me while I finish up my closing duties because I'm not walking out of here alone. I told them about my encounter, and the interesting part was then, I think there were like 6 or 7 of them at the time. 5 of them were like, I thought it was just me. And so then one by one, they started sharing their stories with me. And I was the new person, and none of them had ever told each other. Funny. We were all really embarrassed about it, but I was so scared. Each person had their own story of what happened and what they felt, and almost everyone had heard something. Most of them just heard whispers of their name or something like that. So the restaurant's been closed now for 3.5 years. Other than the owner of the restaurant, I was the last person to leave. I was the last person on staff. And by that point, I was already like living part-time in the Hamptons. So the closure of the restaurant is what pushed me to live in the Hamptons year-round. Well, anyways, so that was 3.5 years ago, right? If I'm doing the math. And I honestly don't put too much thought about that moment. I don't think about it anymore. My mind is in other places. It's not something that comes to mind very often because my life is here. In recent times, within the last 3 months, I want to say I was at a bar. Yeah. And I don't remember the name of the woman, but we were in conversation, and I think she admitted that she was a medium or that she was in some way psychic. And she just like looked point blank at me like, you had a bad experience where you were working, didn't you? You encountered something there and it spoke to you. And I was just like, yeah. And she's like, I feel like he's here and trying to tell you that you weren't supposed to be there. And they were trying to push you out because it wasn't where you were supposed to be. Which is really interesting because what really actually inspired me to quit the job and leave Columbus and start backpacking through Europe, I was working at Deepwood one day, and I was walking through that hallway between the restaurant and the gallery to deliver some food. As I was walking, a man's voice came to me and only said 2 words, "Wake up." And I knew exactly what he meant. It was like, stop living your life on autopilot. And I think that's the person that this medium was talking about. But what just like creeped me out about it was just like, that was so long ago. I'm more than 600 miles away. But I guess maybe the thing that I should be more surprised of is how or why is this particular thing still following me? I didn't believe in any of this stuff when it happened to me, and I was very unprepared for it, and I didn't want to believe it. But it was still coming at me, you know? It's like I still don't even know what to do with that. It's like, okay, there are things that are watching.
Wow, thanks, Nicole, for that one.
Yeah, thank you. Some interesting stuff to consider with
that
that
was
story.
An in-depth recounting of a bizarre I feel like if I was in that situation, you always try to put yourself in these situations when you hear stories like that, but specifically that negative energy with that kind of like fighting.
Oh, the arguing.
Yeah, that she was hearing, and then the vibrating when she went back into the room where it sounded like something was trying to use the vibration.
Right, that ties in what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The Enfield kind
Well,
of.
exactly. That, yeah, the idea that in any kind of haunting or paranormal experience where you have entities trying to come into reality, like the idea of like when the temperature drops shortly before you see the shadow person.
Right. Like
or shortly before
sucking that
something
energy.
moves. Yeah, it's using the heat around you and conform that into physical kinetic energy that can then move. And maybe it's a similar kind of thing with vocalizations.
Right. Yeah, with any sort of arrival of some sort of specter in a room or a presence, like
they have to borrow energy in order to
appear in some form
in our dimension.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you get the orbs, the boring ass orbs that you see in every ghost documentary,
Right.
because maybe that's the easiest thing they can turn into. You know?
Little orbs flying
Those are
around.
weird too, because you can zoom in on some of them and there's like an old man's face inside of it.
Well, I think orbs are interesting when you get people, like there's a lot of YouTube videos that are like poltergeist videos that are actually pretty compelling, where people set up cameras because they feel like their apartment's been haunted for so
Right.
long and it's inexplicable, so they want to film it. And a lot of those like, oh, they're setting it up for a hoax, you feel like. But the thing that would be hard to hoax about that would be the simultaneous appearance of the orbs appearing in like the camera view before the activity begins to happen.
And it's usually around the object that's moved. All of a sudden there's an orb that goes by it, the object moves.
Right. Or there's
or somebody feels somebody touch their arm, and in the video recap you see the orb go like out through their arm, and someone's like, oh.
And then they touch it. Yeah. And I feel like, and a lot of times they don't even point out the orbs, some of these videos where it's the poltergeist activity. And you think, to fake something like that where you're, first of all, it's not as easy as you think to CG orbs in a convincing way, like in kind of a night vision shot, you know? And so when that's done and they don't even point it out, but it's just kind of a background thing that you notice during the poltergeist activity, that lends some credibility.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to Nicole's story, definitely some really compelling.
Yeah, I think the ending of it's interesting too, because it kind of turns to a positive note there, where the idea that maybe there was a spirit there that was kind of giving her some, career advice.
Right.
Move on from this place.
It was maybe a helpful djinn.
Right. So that's interesting.
Or maybe it's a trickster spirit that's like, wake up, live your life, and then she makes choices, and then
travel.
She ends up in a not so great place, and then she's like,
know.
oh, that was a sign pointing the wrong way. Hopefully not.
Yeah, I think from what I remember her saying, there was a lot of drama going on at that place, so it was probably good to get out of there. And they closed down anyway. So.
Oh, for sure. That obviously was the right choice.
But yeah, thank you for that, Nicole. She does tarot reading. She's got some
metaphysical experience for sure,
and some I would say potential psychic ability.
Oh,
it'd be fun to have her on the show,
absolutely,
and have a conversation with her, because she has some interesting stories to tell.
For sure, she has a great website, Faloria.com, which we'll link to in the show notes. But yeah, a lot of metaphysical experience, and so yeah, it would be interesting to talk about tarot and stuff on the show, because there's a lot of like controversy over that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so we'll have to do that. But yes, that was a great story. Do we have any more stories, or are we?
No, I think we should wrap it up. I think this was a good finale for the Halloween season.
Absolutely. Spooky finale for a spooky season.
Again, we barely touched the surface on this matter, as that happens, but I think we've 100% proven that ghosts are real.
Yes.
And that houses are haunted.
You're welcome, people. You now can go to bed knowing safely and
sleep
securely
tight.
that demons are real and ghosts are real. And
the end is nigh.
The end is nigh. That's an uplifting
of the
thought.
Halloween is approaching quickly. So hang your strings of garlic and get your salt lines out around your bed.
Secure your circle. Keep yourself safe from the spirits, people. And tune in next time for the next episode of Beliefful.
Good night.
Good night.